Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Netgain webinar series. Today we are focused on personal cybersecurity and why it is paramount to protect your organization, both at home and at work. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of protecting your home electronics, especially as we go into the world of, and in today's world of the Internet of Things and smart homes. But before we jump in and introduce our speaker and today's agenda, I just wanted to quickly go over a few housekeeping items for today's session. First, I encourage you to use the chat box in the sidebar to ask any questions that you may have throughout the webinar today. As far as format, we're going to plan about a 60-minute or so webinar where we'll have about a 50-minute discussion, and then we'll save some time for some questions at the end. So make sure you send in some of those questions throughout using the chat box or the question box in the webinar control panel. If there are some opportunities to ask some of those questions in the middle, we'll certainly interject that if we're talking on a slide and there's a relevant question that comes in, maybe we'll handle that right away. But regardless, we'll make sure that we get you out of here in 60 minutes or less so you can get back to your day. And then I know everyone always asks, so yes, we are recording this webinar today, and we'll send you a link to that webinar within the next couple of days once we just get the recording all buttoned up. And then finally, not all of the strategies or techniques that we discussed here today will be the best option for your organization. So just as our standard disclaimer, just make sure you check with your IT team or your IT partner if you're using an external partner first before implementing any of these strategies, especially because they do just come with some of those cyber security and information security implications. All right, so I know our audience today includes a mix of Netgain clients and organizations we haven't yet had a chance to work with. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us at Netgain or are new to Netgain, we're a niche IT company where we specialize solely in focusing in helping healthcare practices, financial services firms, and law firms lower their IT costs, improve the efficiencies of their organization, and also protect the data. We focus on making the IT aspect of your business worry-free so that you can focus on some of those other areas of the business that need attention. And especially when we're talking about cybersecurity, that's a big headache for a lot of organizations, I know, and that consumes a lot of your brain space. So we just simplify the IT, secure the data, and turn that IT into a strategic advantage for you so you can finally sleep at night. And wherever you are in your IT journey, whether you have an infrastructure in-house that you're just looking for a managed services provider, or you'd like to begin that process of getting rid of on-site hardware and moving over to the cloud, or if you're already in the cloud and looking for a better, more support-driven organization, we can help with all of that. So, okay, with that obligatory slide out of the way, we'll get the promotion done and we'll meet today's speaker. So we're joined today by Bill Sorensen. Bill's a cloud computing and cybersecurity expert. He's got over 15 years of experience in the cloud technology space. So he certainly knows the space, especially as it's evolved over the years. And he's created and led cutting-edge technology solutions for decades. He continues to speak on cloud computing, optimized organizations, and cybersecurity. So Bill is going to have a lot of that most important subject matter for today. My name's Phil Woken. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Netgain, and we'll just kind of help facilitate discussion, help bring in some of those conversations and questions as they come up. So Bill, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. It's great to be here. I appreciate everybody taking the time to attend, and I think today's topic is, very current in all of our thinkings and kind of what we're doing at home, and really that idea of what we do and how exposed we are, how does that impact work as well. So I was really looking forward to this topic and working on the presentation, so this will be great.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about what we're talking about today, especially as we, part one, we focused a lot on your personal accounts and how you can protect your personal, private, your security there. We did already get a question in from Willis. He was asking if we can send part one's recording so you can access that. Yes, we can certainly get that to you, Willis. If anybody else is looking for that too, let me know, and we can make sure we get you that replay just to kind of set that stage. But in part one, we talked about how you can protect those personal accounts. And then today in part two, we're really focusing on the electronic options. We're looking at what that looks like in an overall landscape, but also, how home electronics and the smart home concept is showing up in the news, and, more maliciously, how hackers are using those devices to really invade all aspects of your home life, and then translating that into what does that mean to help protect your work life too. So we'll talk about some best practices, some personal protection for you and your family, as well as just what we see, a lot in here at Netgain, and also give you some actionable tips that you can do both today and then also maybe over the next 12 months with a cybersecurity checklist for your home. So with that, Bill, let's go ahead and dive in. You want to talk us through today's landscape?
Sure. I think the one thing, just as, and it's a good place to kind of discuss this in the beginning here, is really this concept of what's your personal risk associated with this? What's your really cybersecurity risk, and what are you taking on as being part of these devices? Last webinar, we talked about accounts and protecting those accounts, and kind of minimizing that footprint, that idea of, accepting some risk, but not accepting risk everywhere. And I think here, as we start to look at devices, we want to do the same thing. We want to think about what's our personal cybersecurity risk for our family. What are we trying to protect? What lengths are we willing to go to? There's some convenience that maybe we're willing to give up, others that we're not. And so I think it's a good time to kind of think that through, think about, your personal home, and really what you want to expose your family to. And I think, having a practical approach to that is important. So let's start with the basics. Typically today, everyone's got Wi-Fi at home, and maybe Wi-Fi in their car. They've got Wi-Fi on their phone, so many use their phones for hotspots. Those of us who travel a lot, we're in hotels, there's Wi-Fi there, and we're using it. We assume somewhat that it's safe, and that even in the random coffee shop that you'll connect and work for an hour, let's say, as you've got a break, that you're somewhat secure in that situation. I think what we need to do, though, is understand that in those situations where anyone can connect without security credentials, that is not secure. You can't accept or believe that that's going to be secure. We've run historically some more hacking attack webinars where we've shown how easy it is for someone to step in the middle and watch that traffic, watch what's going on at those open Wi-Fi spots. So we want to talk about, how do you protect that? And is that something that you're going to switch and use your phone for because your phone as a hotspot is more secure? Or are you going to use something called a VPN connection for that? And how does that work? We really want to be cognizant of watching what's going on in our connected life. We'll talk about devices next, but almost everything that we're purchasing electronically now can be connected. So the baby monitors can be connected. Our DVRs can be connected. Our Blu-ray players can be connected. Game consoles that kids have are connected. We've got tablets that are connected. The average home now has just about 20 devices that are connected. And so, it's important to have some thought around that, and really understand that exposure that you've got. We see a lot, so there's this split of what they call attack vectors, or how people might attack you. And some of it's related to the devices, some of it's related to accounts that you have. Others are related to this social engineering piece. Last time we talked about and showed a good example of someone using the phone to social engineer information and ultimately control of someone else's cell phone account. Really, that social engineering happens constantly. Even on our phones, cell phones today, when you're getting that random call from someone who's somewhat trying to sell you something, it's really a lot of social engineering trying to get information out of you. So what we like to do is take a look at, where are our devices, what data do we have on them, what information, what risks are we going to guard against, and then how can we protect our privacy, and that includes privacy of our children. These decisions are trade-offs that are important for us to not just let happen. There are so many times in life, and I use the iPhone example because for me it just consistently hits home. When iPhones first came out, the screen was great. You could get email on it. You could browse the internet, and then it had mapping. And this idea of GPS was phenomenal. No longer would we need maps. We just type in the address, and Google Maps would tell us where we're going. But it came out later, and then part of that mapping was that you could see traffic. And so that was fantastic, especially those of us who may live in larger cities or traveling through cities. The ability to get the shortest distance in time was wonderful. So how did they track traffic? In the beginning, we all kind of assumed that they linked to these traffic services that the cities had. So the cities were tracking traffic, and so they were sharing some information or maybe buying information. It was about 3 years later that it came out that the way Apple and Google were tracking traffic was that they just tracked the movement of the phone. And so they tracked the speed of the phone, so they could say on this road, this was this fast. And way back then, I think if they would have told us, well, as part of this wonderful new fancy device, we're going to actually just follow your phone everywhere it goes forever. And we may not tell you that. A lot of people wouldn't do that. But it's a little bit like the idea that, the story about how do you cook a frog. If you throw the frog in the hot boiling water, it jumps out. But if you slowly turn up the heat, it just sits there and gets used to it and gets used to it and gets used to it. So now today we think about those devices and we think about and know that, Google knows everywhere we've gone. Facebook knows everywhere we've gone. Apple knows everywhere the device has gone. And so, it's an interesting thing, Phil, that, we've adopted that and accepted that.
Yeah, I mean, you see updates come through from, whether it be Facebook or some of these other service providers, and their updates to the privacy policy and the terms and conditions, and it's this, multi-page thing that nobody ever scrolls through. But that's a lot of times where they're changing some of those permissions, and by signing that or scrolling through so you can actually get to the home screen, you're agreeing to that, and sometimes it's for, it's beneficial, it's benevolent, but sometimes there are other apps that you might download on your phone that you might think are helpful, but there sometimes are, and there's been documented instances where some of that you're agreeing to the privacy policy, or you're not, and they're just using that data maliciously, and so it's that tough balance, and so I'm looking forward to talking more about that, Bill, throughout today, because I think that will be certainly relevant for you and me, but then I think also a lot of our audience too, and there's a reason why these have been popular topics for folks. Do you want to talk a little bit about the home electronics? Speaking of
let's move on to
everybody?
that. Yep. One quick follow up on the phone is and we talked about it last time, and I wanted to bring it up again this time just because there is a solution to this Track You Everywhere, and on these phones there are location services, and so there's an item under settings called location services, and you can turn those on and turn those off. And our recommendation is always to turn those off except when you're running the application. So instead of Maps or Facebook being able to track you or your phone everywhere it goes, you want it to only use those location services when it's turned on. So let's jump into home electronics. We touched on it briefly that most of these devices we're buying today have them. Here's kind of a quick list of what we're seeing that are a little bit unique. Obviously, we've seen thermostats, the Nest set of thermostats that got acquired not too long ago by Google. We see wall switches that are remote, smart light bulbs. You can control your watering system, voice commands for anything in the house. Your blinds now can go up and down. Really good things like water leak sensors. I know people with cabins have some active applications that tell them when they're not there, if there was an issue. Door locks, and we've got a good example of that. And really kind of this whole house audio, we see some of that continue to grow with Alexa's acceptance and growing. Doorbells, we'll talk a little bit about Ring, and just everything imaginable is now connected. Let's touch briefly again then on Wi-Fi. And I'm going to intersperse kind of some of the recommendations, although we've got a lot at the end. Just on Wi-Fi, most of our homes have that now. Many homes have extenders, Wi-Fi extenders, so you may have the Wi-Fi device in one room, but you want to extend that Wi-Fi to the garage, so you've bought a little extender. Each one of those devices is really a computer. All these devices are really computers. And so I want you to think about that a little bit, and that means a variety of things. One is that, yep, it's built to do the function that it was created for. Underneath that is typically a common kind of operating system, kind of like Windows or Linux or some of the other ones you may hear, that runs that application that lets it be a Wi-Fi router. The reality of it is that underlying kind of base of computer that's there is what ends up exposing us to dramatic exposures across the risk spectrum. People can get into those devices, take control of them, still let that device run Wi-Fi for the house, but then let it run other things as well. And those are the things that you don't want to happen and you don't know about. I think the interesting thing with all of these is the goal of these hackers is to gain a foothold within your environment, to steal data from you, steal your information, to then do something with that either gains them money or gains them leverage against you. And it's no longer that 13-year-old kid in the basement somewhere. These are huge systematic groups that are doing these attacks. Let's talk about cameras and baby monitors. Security systems fit in here with cameras as well. And we'll show a couple examples of how you can even see cameras that are exposed to the internet. So with cameras, the interesting thing is, the idea that maybe you want to watch your yard, your front yard, your backyard, your doors. About 15 years ago, you could do this. You'd have hardwired cameras going into your security system. Maybe it was being recorded and stored locally. Not many homes had that. We saw that in a lot of retail establishments, and you continue to see that. Now with the advent of these small Internet of Things, IoT devices that lets a camera get really a computer in it, and then record when there's movement, store that locally, maybe move that to the cloud, it's a lot more attractive. Maybe you want to know if somebody's walking around your property. Some people have cameras in the house. Baby monitors now, there's camera options for that. And so, you can check on your child besides just listening in. You can, take a quick peek from your phone, whether you're at home or you're at work, into that baby's room. So we see that. Some people have them on outbuildings, so they want to see is somebody in the outbuilding or something's gone on. And so kind of the functionality there is something that's pretty attractive for specific situations. What we end up with there is problems around those cameras being connected to the internet. We talked briefly about Wi-Fi, and typically in a Wi-Fi house, everybody connects kind of to the same, what they would say is network. So every device can see each other. A best practice is to separate your kind of normal web browsing for your computers, your phones, your tablets, separate those completely from any of these other internet connected devices. So there's methods to do that. They're somewhat technical, and so you may end up needing assistance with that. But you really want to separate all these other things from your normal traffic. The risk there is that if somebody compromised, let's say the baby monitor, which was a very, very popular compromise just even a couple of years ago, someone could sit out in front of your house and watch all your baby monitors, listen in, and literally sit there undetected. And then once they got control of that baby monitor, they could get on your normal network, start looking at all your devices, and start pushing against those devices to get in. So you really want to separate those Internet of Things devices from your regular traffic. Next, we want to talk a little bit about these more environmental things. Nest, Honeywell, thermostats. Ring has been very, very popular. I have a really good friend a few weeks ago, saw him, and first thing he did was, show me his front door, and he had installed Ring, which is the doorbell with video, and could see, what's going on at his front door. And he had it set up so that when there was movement, the camera would detect that and send him a message, and he could see what's going on. Then he could actually talk to somebody at the front door. So that's an interesting thing. Ring got hacked about 6 months ago. And the situation created a problem where if someone ever had access to your front door, let's say it was a boyfriend, a previous boyfriend, that access never would go away, and that access could be shared. And so there was a tremendous amount of angst for the people who had Ring doorbells, and other people were watching them as they came and went from their houses. Since then, and Ring was one of the interesting ones, it took them about 3 months to fix it. Most of these devices are really aggressive in fixing things, but Ring wasn't, and it was a shock to Amazon, who had bought them, that that they had this problem. And so it was a significant exposure for a lot of time, and they weren't overly communicative about it to the Ring users. So that was a big black eye. Next, and Phil, do you guys, just out of curiosity, because this is one of those interesting things, Amazon's got this huge push with Alexa the last couple of years, and they almost give away Echoes now, the device that lets you talk to Amazon and get things from them. Are you guys? Do you guys have an Alexa at home?
We do not.
Not.
part of it is, but I'll still talk to Siri. So I guess I can't say that I'm worried about these smart operating systems that can these mobile assistants or whatever. So, but I don't know. I think there's some, whether it's an Alexa or a Google Home. I don't know. Like for some reason I imagine like a differentiation between those products and Siri, but I have a feeling that's probably not accurate, not the case. So, but we've not gone the Alexa route, and part of it too is there's something about I don't know how accurately it would be able to say Alexa, order me more toilet paper. That just I feel like I'd want to price. There's more things besides just the security perspective. So
Yeah.
No Alexa for me. How about for you guys?
No, we haven't done it yet. I actually won a Alexa device a little while ago, and am somewhat reluctant to set it up even in one room in the house. So I'm waiting
Sure.
on it. The interesting thing, so Alexa, obviously is a microphone and speaker at its physical core, and basically the idea is it listens for its name, and as soon as it hears Alexa, it starts recording whatever comes next, and then tries and figures out what you want. And so conceptually, it's Hal from the old 2001 movie, and you're just going to tell Alexa things. Alexa, what's the weather? Alexa, what's my next appointment? Alexa, let's listen to some jazz. Alexa, I want to order something. So the concept is interesting, and I think the sales of Alexa devices, Echoes, has been huge. But there's also, and many people have probably seen some of the news that has Alexa, listening too long, Alexa coming back with strange sounds. There was a published hack just a little while ago where somebody created an Alexa skill. And so Amazon has this concept of Alexa skills. You can create a service offering that when someone says, what's the best golf course near me, Alexa may look that up in someone's skill, and somebody's created this database of golf courses with rankings, and then Alexa will use that to respond with an answer. And so a small group of college students created an Alexa skill that would turn on Alexa, and typically Alexa listens for a period of time and then turns off the mic and then responds. And what this group did was wrote a skill that when you asked a specific question, Alexa would provide a comment on that, would respond appropriately, but then Alexa would not turn off the microphone. And what this group then did was capture everything for, I think it was the next 30 minutes, and then automatically route that to Alexa transcription, and it would produce the transcribed 30-minute conversation. And so they did it as a test. They ran it and published it, and then they ran results for a while, and then kind of exposed it to the world. So it's not always about what Amazon's doing, but it's about what other people can do with those devices. So, again, we're at that point where we want you to think about your footprint and do you want to use these devices? Now we'll cover some of the pros and cons with Alexa and some of the things in best practices. So if you're going to do that, we've got some insight in how to protect yourself as well. So let's go ahead and show some of the in the news. So this is interesting, and because we're in this industry, I'm always reading. Every week I get a bunch of things that talk about risks and exposures and those types of things. In the Internet of Things, IoT is kind of what the industry calls it. There's all these devices out there, and they're old. One of the biggest reasons for exposure is because they're old. So whether you've got 5-year-old cameras, 5-year-old VCRs or DVRs or disc players, you've got old computers that live in your world that somebody has control of. So this is this bizarre thing. Earlier this year, there was a huge denial of service attack that ran for 2 days. And what that was, and what that means is that somebody had corralled a bunch of computers to kind of ask for data from 2 different websites in a volume that they could never respond to. So it's kind of like, if you've got a website and all of a sudden instead of 10 people a day or 30 people a day, you've got 10 million people trying to get information from you. Basically, it crushes that technical piece, and you can't reply to anyone, and that goes offline. And so there was a big one earlier this year that happened, and as the targets started to look at and get help from the FBI and others, what they found out was there was 100,000 cameras that had been involved in this attack. And so someone had hijacked 100,000 cameras, had turned them loose in coordination against these 2 specific targets at the same moment, at the same time, until there was a solution somewhere else. And so those cameras were the cameras that you probably have in the garage or somewhere else that you've got turned on and you've not updated. So, there's a dramatic risk of those being used for nefarious things that you're not a part of. We talked a little bit about the Amazon Echoes. There's a move now to have electronic locks in your home, and we'll show a kind of an example of a breach there. And so this is happening everywhere and kind of all over the place. We just want to have us have this heightened awareness about this. Let's move on. So Phil, I know you guys are in the process of building a house, and I've done that once in my life, and it was a lot of fun to make decisions about how things go and does it get wired and all those kinds of things. You got to choose locks. Are you going to have the eaves wired for cameras or electricity? Yep. What are you guys thinking just as a family at this point?
Yeah, so last weekend we were out just appliance shopping, and we hadn't done it in a while, and so it was interesting to see some of the technology developments and breakthroughs that come with that. And then luckily we weren't shopping in a price range that allowed us to really consider whether or not we needed a smart fridge that would tell us the weather on the front panel, or tell us when we're low on milk or something like that. So thankfully we didn't have to go that route, but we are starting to see some of those different things and some of those considerations, and some of the ones you talked about some of those protections and some of those different conveniences. I do love technology, and I like to adapt and adopt technology where we can. But honestly, knowing now what I know now, it just gives me pause, about, okay, really, is that something, the convenience of that, is that going to be something that we're going to want to open ourselves up to? So we certainly do have those conversations, and we were just talking about it this past weekend, so it's certainly relevant. At least
and I think we're just talking about moving again, and some of these thoughts are foremost in our minds as well. Is what's our level of comfort with this? So let's talk about the devices today. Let's talk about these people are interested in getting access to your devices. They are not, or they could be your neighbors, but they could easily be neighbors from Korea or Eastern Bloc countries or anywhere else. So we know these devices are vulnerable. So how do you find out if you own them? Are my devices vulnerable? So let's talk about that just for a minute. Kind of the best way to do that is to just literally go take a look at the device. There'll be a nameplate on it with brand, serial number, model number. Take a picture of that with your camera, and do that for all your devices, from your DVRs to your baby monitors to your cameras, and then go look them up. Most of these devices you've acquired over time, probably all of them have software and security updates that most likely you haven't done. Ultimately, we're going to want you to do those things. Pull up the internet, look them up one by one, and find out the status of them. Search for your device name, the model number, and the word hack. YouTube is a phenomenal learning and teaching environment, and so many times, you can literally learn anything from YouTube. The negative of that is if you put your device in and the word hack, you can see what somebody else is doing to get control of your device. So what we really want to do is get you to move toward the method of updating these. And so the vendor site will show how do I update these, those kinds of things. Now, as I was putting the content for this together and as this content changes, because new devices come out and new exposures come out all the time, it's important to take a look when you're going to go acquire one of these. Let's say, Phil, that you were interested in the front door, back door, and the garage, and so you're going to do 3 cameras, and the one in the garage is going to watch the garage door too. You've got three doors in the house, and you're going to mount them outside and under the eaves, and so maybe you're going to put some electricity up there, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're going to run them off of a network cable that'll carry power to them. So those cameras, you can buy for $30 or you can buy for $300. So just as you're thinking about that in the audience for your homes, realize that the least expensive devices here are going to be the ones that don't have the extra security pieces in them. And as you're acquiring those, you want to be cognizant of that exposure. So let's say you go acquire 3 middle-priced ones. You get your builder to put them in, and you're all set to hook them up. What we really want you to do is separate those devices from your main network. And so all these routers we have today that provide Wi-Fi, almost all of them provide the ability to have guest networks or other secure networks, those kinds of things. And so we want to separate those. And then we're going to want you to change their login IDs and passwords on each device and then on the overall account, so that you're using complicated passwords that are long. And again, these aren't ones that you're going to have to worry about getting into very often. And so that's the direction we want you to go. We'll talk about that more in the next slide, but just wanted to give that example. So let's look at a couple of these websites that can show you things. And we list a couple here. Phil, let's do the YouTube example of these students opening the door lock.
All right, that sounds good. I'll get that loaded here, Bill. I'll put the other link for the search engine for internet connected devices in the chat, so you'll be able to view that link at your convenience too, but we'll go ahead and get the YouTube video here loaded up.
Then the other one, insacam.org, in the link there as well. That's actually an interesting one. After this video, we'll come back and talk about that.
The idea is to improve the safety of your home and to allow you to monitor what's going on inside your house and to remotely potentially control it. Unfortunately, this also opens the door to potential vulnerabilities, and we're going to be showing you some attacks that are possible, which should give homeowners some pause when considering deploying these kind of technologies. Okay, this attack involves a homeowner who has installed a smart lock on their front door and is using a battery monitor app to monitor battery levels. However, I have written this app and I've encoded malicious instructions in it to send me an SMS message whenever the user programs a PIN code. This will let me enter the home whenever I want. So I received SMS telling me the code the user has just programmed, and I'm just going to walk over the home and unlock the door. As you can see, the bolt turns and I can unlock the door. The second attack exploits an app that the user has downloaded from the SmartThings App Store that allows homeowners to remotely lock and unlock door locks. I send a message to that app using my browser, and it will let me program my own PIN code, even multiple PIN codes if I want to, and it will allow me sustained access to the home. As you can see, the bolt turns and I can open the door. We have reached out to Samsung and SmartThings team on the vulnerabilities that we found in their platform. So if you're considering using these technologies, you should analyze from the perspective of what's the worst case scenario, which in this case often would be that a hacker has at least as equal access to your smart devices that you house remotely as you do.
Thanks, Phil. I think the key piece there is what he said at the end is, these vulnerabilities are real, and you've got to think about personally what exposure you want to have for your family. And this, so this device was a Samsung device, so not a small company, a monstrous electronics company who released this device, as well as others with exposures like this. So a huge thing. Probably the last thing I want to do on this page is just talk about the video streaming. And we'll talk about insecam.org, www.insecam.org. You guys can look this up at home. It's interesting. These are internet cameras that are unprotected or protected with bad passwords. And so someone's collected that, submitted it to insecam.org, and then it becomes part of their search engine and part of their display. So I just talked to a colleague that had gone out and watched cameras of the hurricane that had just come through to see what was going on. So there's a tremendous amount, and it's literally tens and tens of thousands of cameras that are exposed. So let's be cognizant about that. Let's move on to best practices here, Phil. So what we want to do is talk about how you protect yourself, how you protect your family. In reality, the ability to protect yourself also impacts your work environment. So what we want to do is we want to protect our computers, both Macintosh and Windows devices, as well as our phones. And so we want we want you to use malware protection. So the idea there is either through social engineering, phishing emails, other things, you get these opportunities to have bad software installed on your computers. Virus protection is less effective today because this malware changes every time it's sent out, it's changed. So virus protection usually looks at a pattern, or what they'd say is a signature of a virus or of malware to stop it. But since they can change this so quickly, it changes every time now. There's a product called Malwarebytes that we like that does a fantastic job and isn't very expensive. It's worthwhile to put that on your Macs and your Windows devices. For accounts, we want two-factor authentication everywhere you can have it. And what that means is that it's not just an ID and a password anymore. It's an ID, password, and then it's some type of PIN that you typically have to enter. Sometimes there's an app on your phone to get that PIN. Sometimes they message it to you. But the idea that you need one more step to get access and to get authenticated to get in. If you think about things like your bank accounts, Amazon, Amazon's a good example because of the devices that are now connected to Amazon. It's important to have that extra protection. The FBI came out a number of years ago, and as they're trying to come up with methods to stop tens of millions of dollars of money moving, their best recommendation for literally the people of the United States is use two-factor authentication for everything. Next, we want you to inventory those devices that you've got at home. Go take those pictures, document them, and we're going to want you to look those up and really find out, are they exposed or not. We're going to want you to update those as well. So get those updates online and get those devices updated. Figure out what you want to do with Alexa, Google Home. Is that for you? If you're going to use Alexa, consider turning off the mic. Usually there's I think it's a button on top that you can press to turn off the mic. It's a little less convenient than screaming Alexa across the room and having things start, but that stops the physical access of the mic. So that's a plus. On the new Echo Look, which is the video camera and display, we want you to think about making sure that you don't turn on the drop-in feature. The drop-in feature allows you to connect to, let's say, your elderly parent's house and just see what's going on. So you can do that without them responding at all, which conceptually we could see needs and desires around that. But if it's not one of those situations, we want you to turn that off. I think the other thing is, if you're going to use the camera with that, let's be cognizant of where we're having that camera point. If you're not using it at the moment, having it point to the blank wall seems to be a reasonable solution, or have it covered. Realize that once you say Alexa, that your recordings are getting, or your conversations are getting recorded. That's happening, that's getting transmitted to Amazon, it's getting analyzed, so let's think about that. Let's talk about passwords a little bit. We'll do this briefly. We want you to have complicated passwords. It's tough to have passwords for everything that are unique. A best way to do and control that is with a password manager like LastPass or OnePass. Those are two we recommend. They encrypt everything locally, and that encryption cannot be broken. The risk to that is extremely small compared to what you've got out in the world. The other piece, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the other devices quickly. Nest, the thermostats, let's make sure you're setting up two-factor authentication there. On any of these devices, we don't want you to buy used ones. Buying them off of eBay or Craigslist literally exposes you dramatically to things that have been possibly put on them. The other piece I want to just touch on briefly is really, let's never send information across email or SMS, texting that's confidential. Let's just not do that. Okay, Phil, I know we're going to run up against time here. Let's go on to the brief discussion of how protecting you protects your work. Now, we've talked about most of these in the previous slides. The key piece here is, besides having this kind of footprint and understanding of how your risk is at home, your work typically has these policies and procedures and interest in keeping things confidential and information and yourselves not exposed. So making sure that you can't get blackmailed for something, you can't get exposed or impersonated at work electronically is key. Keeping, again, those IDs and passwords separate, making sure that you talk to your family and kids too about their protections. There's a concern around sharing pictures with teenagers, and so it's an important thing for you to talk about with them, what's appropriate, what's not, and that literally texting a picture is like texting it to the internet. The other piece here is this concept of personal VPNs, and we touched on it earlier for that coffee shop. There's a method where on your device you can start this virtual private network. I like NordVPN as a service provider. It's not very expensive. It then encrypts your connection to the internet, routes it somewhere other than where you are, and then you can get connected and be completely invisible. In an open Wi-Fi environment, that's a key method to protect yourself. Let's go on, Phil, and just briefly talk about Netgain and what we do here and how we help firms.
Yeah, if it's all right with you, Bill, I think in the interest of time, I think let's just go ahead. I know we had some questions come in, and I want to make sure that we address some of those.
Yeah, you bet.
So that we can really focus on that. And so let's go ahead. If you do have any follow-up questions that you want us to ask or that you want us to discuss, pop those into the questions, but I just want to make sure that we get some of those answers answered. So Bill is wondering, so is WPA2, which is a security setting that you can put on your Wi-Fi and your router and some of those internet devices, is that setting vulnerable, or is that still a reasonable precaution if you're setting that as the threshold?
That's a great question. WPA2 got hacked just earlier this year, and the hack was published. I think I want to say Crush, KRUSH is the hack, so you can look that up. So as part of the device manufacturers, what they've been working on over the last few years, there's now new devices that have a new encryption method called WPA3 that goes to a dramatic new level of encryption. So if you're looking for new devices, always look for, is it WPA3 encryption level capable, and then just set that. WPA2, it's kind of a brute force hack to get the password of the device, and it's public and published, so it's out there in the wild. So that is something to look at. Good question.
Okay, great. Just quickly, Sarah was wondering how you should connect to Wi-Fi when at a hotel or in a public place. She asks VPN or personal hotspot, question mark. I know you had talked about the benefit of a personal VPN, Bill, but is a personal hotspot going to be add that level of protection without a VPN, or
It
is
is,
it?
yeah, it's a good question, and it is. Again, we just touched on it, NordVPN, and you can go search personal VPNs, security comparison, and there'll be a couple, first couple links, there'll be a couple good articles to glance at if you want to go the personal VPN route. Otherwise, just turning your phone into a hotspot can significantly increase that security as well, because that's literally that personal connection across your cellular network. It does use data, so just be cognizant of that, as many plans charge for that.
Great. How do you protect your router and Wi-Fi extender from a hacker?
Yep, good question. So the extender will have an ID and password, and typically you connect those two together with the button on top of your router that's called WPS. It's an automated method to connect the two securely. So you can use that method to connect it, and then it'll pass those credentials along and kind of create that extended network. What we typically like is different passwords for them, passwords and IDs, with the idea that you're protecting each device individually. Usually the instructions tell you how to do that.
Okay, great. If you use two-factor authentication, can you have similar passwords across websites?
That's a good question, because the password becomes somewhat innocuous. Almost doesn't even matter anymore if you're using two-factor authentication. So as long as you're using two-factor authentication, I don't mind that. Some people say no matter what, you've got to have that complicated middle password, but you're going to get validation on your phone, or typically it's your phone, that's the PIN for you to enter. So the need for that extremely complicated middle password goes down dramatically. So I don't mind that.
All right, perfect. And then Bill's wondering, is there a difference between 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi? More so around, is one more vulnerable versus the other?
Today the answer is no. It's really the device that's the vulnerability, and so we want to focus on those devices. Make sure you go out, check the device for, they'll call it firmware update, so that's the software that runs on the device, and make sure you're doing those. It's a good point too, just to quickly bring up on your phones, when they come out with operating system updates and application updates, those are really worth doing. I know that many times they may decrease the functionality of the phone, or the performance, I should say, of the phone, but the security exposures associated with those are significant, and typically they're public before the update comes out. So getting those updates done reduces your security footprint exposure dramatically.
Excellent, perfect. Okay, thanks, Bill. So we'll give it just another couple minutes if there are some additional questions that kind of filter in. I know we kind of went through those kind of rapid fire, but I just wanted to quickly mention and kind of plug the next iteration of the cybersecurity webinar series. We've had a lot of really good positive feedback from those who attended part one, and hopefully part two now we'll hear that too. So we're just going to kind of keep it going, kind of turn it into a monthly series. We'll send registration details soon, but in October, which happens to be Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we'll discuss the top 5 questions that you need to ask your organization and just understand your own organization's cybersecurity risk and vulnerabilities. So we'll send registration information out to you soon, so be on the lookout. But if you wanted to put a placeholder on your calendar, you could look at Thursday, October 18th and 12 o'clock. So we're just working on confirming and finalizing some information. So that may fluctuate a little bit, but we'll make sure to send those registration details soon. And then also, I know sometimes even the smallest of cybersecurity precautions can can make a big difference. So for those of you who attended the webinar today, we are tossing in a little freebie, and you see it on the screen there. But if you have a webcam cover, or if you don't have a webcam cover, I should say, you might want to think about putting one of those on your laptop or putting them on your desktop webcam, just to prevent that visual connection if someone does happen to access your machine. You just want to make sure that video portion is turned off. The audio portion, the audio may still transmit, but you just want to make sure that at least the video is taken care of to protect yourself from some of those spying hackers. So if you are interested and you don't have one on your device yet, or the devices of some of your power or your VIP users in your organization, we're more than happy to send you one or a couple. So just send me an email. My email's on the screen there, and then we'll make sure to pop that in the mail in the next few days and get that to you. So also as a reminder, we'll just be emailing you in the next few days with the link to the on-demand replay of the webinar. I did put the link to that in the chat box for part 1 if you wanted to go back to that. But for those of you tuning into the replay today, you can access part 1 at netgaincloud.com/webinars/your-cybersecurity-life. So you can check that. We'll also send you this on-demand replay for part 2. But we also have a lot of free resources that you can access at any time on our blog and through our resources portal. So you can access both of those at netgaincloud.com/blog or netgaincloud.com/resources. Oh, that is a lot. So Bill, thank you for taking some time out of your day today to talk cybersecurity. I know I pulled you away from some other meetings, so thank you for that. But most importantly, thanks to all of you who joined us today too, in carving out a few minutes of your day, especially when I talk about cybersecurity and such an important topic. That's going to be key. So thank you all so much for carving out some of your time today.